Who's your favourite American Horror Story villain? Here's my top 10. Hey there guys, and welcome back to Dino Reviews. So given that we are in day 7 of our 31 days of Halloween, I want to do something a little bit different. Generally at this time of year we have a brand new season of American Horror Story, but since we're not getting it, I wanted to look back at previous seasons and just give you my own ranking of the best villains of the show. Now we are just doing the top 10 in the villains. One thing to note with American Horror Story is there is many different villains. I do have some honourable mentions guys, so we're going to jump into them straight away. My first honourable mention is Mr. March. So he's actually one of my favourite characters in all of American Horror Story. If I kind of had to rank my own top 5, he would definitely make it. I love everything about the character. I love the look of the character. I love the accent Evan Peters portrays in it, and just the absolute madness that accompanies his character. Another honourable mention is Margaret Booth. So she is from the last season of American Horror Story, 1984. Now she is absolutely kooky, absolutely loony, and that's kind of why I love the character. She's a bit over the top at times, and definitely towards the last part of the season, the character does start to slowly fall apart, but still I love watching that character. She's kooky, she's mad, and she's really fun on screen. Another honourable mention is Dr. Arden from American Horror Story Asylum. Now he actually came very close to taking my top 10, but he just missed out on the mark. What I like about the character though is he's quite cold. He is of course very serious. He's an ex-Nazi war criminal. And just compared to other villains in American Horror Story, they generally kind of give you a character you can relate to. You know, they do soften the characters after a while. With Dr. Arden you do not get that. He is evil to the bone, and that's what I love about the character. And my last honourable mention is Twisty the Clown. Now just like Dr. Arden, he came close to making the top 10. Honestly, the reason he didn't is just because he's not in too much of his season. He starts off as this brilliant villain. He is probably one of the best introductions as a character in the series by far, but just halfway through the season, not even, I think it's like episode 4 or 5, he gets written out of the show. It's unfortunate because he was a really interesting character. He was terrifying to see on screen, but they do cut him out way too early. They give him a little backstory, which I do enjoy watching it. I like that they kind of delved into his character, but just from what we got at the start of the season, how scary he actually could have been, it's unfortunate he wasn't in more. But now on to our top 10, and coming in at 10th place is Michael Langdon from American Horror Story Apocalypse. Now Michael Langdon had a lot going for him. He was kind of billed as this antichrist, the person who was going to take down the world and bring on the apocalypse, and he definitely does do that. I think the first half of Apocalypse is really strong, and I really enjoy his character. He kind of seems unstoppable, and that he can really go head to head with the Supreme. Unfortunately, halfway through the season, they definitely delve into his character a little too much, and I actually think it weakens the character overall. I like how powerful he is. I love how he can really take on the witches, but once you get to know the character and you kind of see that he isn't this big evil you were expecting, it is a bit of a letdown. Next up, taking 9th place is Madame LALAURIE from American Horror Story Coven. Now Madame LALAURIE is actually one of the most heartless and cold killers in the entire series. So she keeps slaves and she tortures and murders them. She is based on a real life character, which actually makes her even more terrifying. Now what really disturbs me about the character is just how racist and evil she is, especially in that first half of the season. Second half of the season they do kind of lighten her a little bit more and try to get her to come around to seeing the world in a different way. Honestly, you know, that is funny. It has some kind of campy moments in there, but it does take away from the character slightly. Now, of course, by the end of the season, she is right back to where she started. She's this racist, evil woman that's trying to kill as many people as she can. And I do like that they left the character there. She kind of gets this tragic ending. She deserves it more than anything else. Taking 8th place is Tate Langdon from American Horror Story Murder House. Now with Tate, a lot of people seem to love this character and there's a huge fan base for him and Violet. I get that in a way, but at the same time you have to remember that he was on top of an entire school shooting. And for me, that school shooting scene in the first season of the show is actually one of the strongest scenes in the entire series. It's very dark, it's very cold, and it does hit home. The story about his schoolmates and how they got killed is really tragic, but beyond that, he's also the rubber man. He also rapes Violet's mother, so he does a lot of bad things throughout the season. So I do think although people love him and he is a fan favourite, he's also a very evil and troubled character. Coming in at 7th place is the Countess. Now the Countess is of course played by Lady Gaga in American Horror Story Hotel. So at the time when her casting was announced, I know a lot of people were skeptical, but honestly Gaga gives an amazing performance in Hotel. So she plays the Countess, who's kind of seductive, controlling vampire that wants nothing more to gain power. I really enjoy that character. I think there's a lot of layers of course to the Countess, and you find that out as the season goes on. But even though you do see she has a heart and she is a character you can relate to, the act she commits throughout the season of Hotel still make her quite evil. She's quite conniving, she's quite controlling, and all she really wants at the end of the day is power. Taking the number 6 spot is Kai Anderson from American Horror Story Cult. So with Kai, he is probably the most realistic character we've ever gotten on American Horror Story, especially with everything that's happening in the world today. Just how he manipulates and controls his followers and really drums up anger and hate were all too realistic and really based in modern times. The character doesn't have too many redeeming qualities. He is out just to kind of create anarchy more than anything else, and he's a really interesting character for that. Now he is an exaggerated version of that, of course, and again with all American Horror Story seasons, in the second half of the season it does kind of go off the rails slightly, and he kind of turns into this ridiculously over the top version of the character they're trying to say. But even at that, there's something really dark about him. He's one of the most disturbing and realistic characters of the show by far. Making it to the halfway mark, taking the number 5 spot, is the Butcher from American Horror Story Roanoke. Now I know a lot of people aren't fans of this season. Quite a few fans of the series rank this as one of the weakest, if not the weakest season in the entire show. For me, I'm actually a huge fan of Roanoke. As a horror fan, I think this one just primarily focuses on the horror aspect of it. There's no in-jokes, it's not very kind of campy or over the top like other seasons in the show. Instead we get pure horror, and that's also what you get with the Butcher. She is deranged and she is an absolute psychopath throughout the entire season. She doesn't really crack any jokes. The way she disembowels people and kills people throughout the season is very sick and it's very twisted. Just her whole character, as I said, is quite dark. Now of course the cherry on the cake is that Kathy Bates plays her, and what Kathy Bates does well is play a villain. You can't fault her throughout this, even if she is playing an actress playing the Butcher. Even at that, when the real Butcher shows up, I think it's like the midway mark in the season, she's even darker than Kathy Bates' version. You don't see much of her face and you are terrified by her presence. Taking the number 4 spot is Dandy Mott from American Horror Story Freakshow. Dandy Mott honestly is one of my favourite villains ever. He is so over the top, he's funny at times, he's terrifying, but he's an absolute Looney Tune. He believes he's a god, he bathes in his mother's blood, and he kills anyone he can. There's nothing really with this character that you can talk him down because he is just crazy. He kind of starts the show as this rich, selfish brat, but then slowly becomes the big bad of the season when Twisty is taken out. And he just kind of assumes his role and starts killing people left, right and centre. I love the character just because of how ridiculous and over the top at times he is, but he's also quite terrifying when he needs to be. When he does the big shooting in Freakshow, all the jokes, all the comedy that comes with his character suddenly drop away and you're left with this really scary, really dark being. Down to our top 3, and coming in next is Oliver THREDSON, otherwise known as Bloodyface. So Bloodyface for me is definitely one of the scariest killers in all of American Horror Story. Again guys, as a massive horror fan, I loved watching him on screen. He's a mix of a lot of deranged killers you'd get in horror movies. He peels people's faces off and actually wears them himself. He tortures and pretty much rapes Lana Winters, and he's just a downright evil character. There's not a lot to like about him at all, but what I do enjoy about the character is he has one of the best arcs in the entire series. So him and Lana Winters are kind of battle throughout the season of Asylum is definitely the strongest point of that season, and when it all kind of comes together towards the end, it makes a perfect story. Now just missing out on the number 1 spot and coming in second is Fiona Good from American Horror Story Coven. So Fiona Good, just like I said, with a lot of characters in American Horror Story, she doesn't have a lot of redeemable qualities. So she is kind of all out for herself. She's pretty much the most powerful witch there is because she is the Supreme. Now instead of using her powers to kind of build up her coven and get this great school going, instead she focuses it all on herself, how she looks, how powerful she is and how rich she is. The only thing Fiona Good really cares about is herself, and that ran true for the entire season. At the same time, she looks great in every scene she's in. She's powerful, she's witchy, and people love that about her. Of course she does slightly redeem herself by the end of the season, but at that point she's kind of too far gone. She does kind of lay herself down as this really black-hearted character, but that's what people enjoy about her. She's a great villain and by far one of the best in the entire series. Finally guys, coming in at first place is Sister Mary Eunice from American Horror Story Asylum. Honestly, for me, there could be no one else could take this spot. She is a fantastic character and absolutely terrifying throughout. What's great about the character, she starts the season as this kind of gentle, really innocent character, but when the devil or someone claiming to be the devil takes over her body, she really goes all out. So she spends her time throughout the season murdering patients at the asylum, manipulating the staff, and even driving Sister Jude crazy. And she does this in this very dark, seductive tone. The character honestly is by far the best one in American Horror Story when it comes to villains, because she is literally the devil. You know, she is the big bad out of all of them, even more than the Antichrist. But guys, that is just my own top 10 ranking of my American Horror Story villains. Make sure guys you let me know what your favourite are in the comments below. If you want me to do another video guys on American Horror Story, maybe on the biggest heroes, or even just ranking the actors and actresses best parts in the series, also let me know down below. Make sure guys you pop on the notification bell and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next one.